with my stuff.
All right. This is the part where we do that idle chit-chat. How you doing, Brad?
I'm swell. Oh, are we on the air, Tom?
We are on the air. This is the show.
Holy crap, I'm scared.
No.
Tanya was saying she was nervous earlier. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
I'm taking
yeah.
I'm taking off my earrings because I have headphones on now, so I'm just kind of fumbling around as usual.
All right.
That's interesting. I took mine off, too.
Well, good. See, then
Hey, I even took my
we're
nose
ready to
ring
go.
out.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. We're going to...
Stop that. Keeping it above the shoulders.
All right. Yeah. We're gonna.
You got that.
Okay, we're done now.
All right.
So-
I'm going to fire up the show. Brad can't hear this, so here we
Fire
go.
it up, boy!
Don't hang on to outdated imperialist dogma. Be free for the next episode of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. And now, the Annoying Peasants.
That was Warren with his imperialist dogma intro for us. I think I want to turn it down. Oh, that's turning it down a little too much, too drastically. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. We'll get this taken care of here in a second. Here we go. Hey, Brad,
Yeah.
did you get my docket?
Everything's a crime, Tom.
And wait, Tanya has to add her subtitle.
And everyone's a criminal.
Okay, well, welcome, everybody, to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. We are very glad that you joined us. This is our weekly podcast. I'm with my good friend Tom and our even better friend. How does that make you
Even
feel?
better. I'm even better.
Yes, you are.
With Tanya. And my name is Brad, and thanks for joining us tonight. Tanya, of course, is a.k.a. the Northwoods mom. That's really secretive stuff, so her
Yeah.
name's really not Tanya. That's a code name.
Yes.
Yeah. Incognito.
So, as I've already, totally blown, tonight's episode is entitled Everything's a Crime. And thanks for joining us. We have a great show in store for you, and we're going to get right to it.
Yes.
So among the discussion topics tonight, we have the recent Republican entries into the presidential race. Now, I've lost count. There's so many. And I'm absolutely, as a side note, loving this thing with Trump. It's, he's just so entertaining.
Yep.
Reactions to the Supreme Court ruling
Yep.
last week. And the common link among us with all the mass shootings. We'll talk about Greece, and the feature story is entitled Everything's a Crime and much more. So stay with us. Remember, the chat room is open if you are listening live tonight.
Hey, and somebody, I was going to say somebody's in there, but that's Tanya.
That's me.
She's on top of it. See ya?
I'm driving distracted, but I'm multitasking here. I did all our Facebook posts and got the chat room open and everything. So,
She just can't get enough of us.
Yes.
yeah. Like I said, just call me Roz.
There you go. Yeah. If anybody is out there, and the only question I'd have is, our audio good? If so, is Brad's different than ours? If it is, I can adjust it up or down if need be. So
Because Tom always likes to try to turn me down.
yeah, I like to put Brad in the background.
What's that? We can't hear you, Brad.
Yeah, that's right.
More for Tom to say.
Yeah, the weird thing is, of course, on Skype, you always come through just fine, obviously, in my headset, so I can't tell what's going out. That's why I asked the question. Anyway, as one might imagine, I had, this week, actually, I probably had a few more discussions than I normally do with other people.
Hey, Tom,
Oh, yeah.
where were you over the weekend?
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
I took a little road trip.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah. But one of the discussions I had with the person who shall remain nameless was, we talked about, I guess this is my shtick for the big picture on the show, that justice is not a system of rules and regulations that are created. The reality of justice is rooted in man's nature. And I had the discussion with somebody about man's nature, and there's no nature to man. And I just kind of, I don't know. I wonder at that. I sit there and go, okay, there's no nature to the man. Of course, I do the same ones because I'm not real smart. Is there a nature to copper? And they're like, yeah. I go, well, is like gravity inherent in nature? No matter how we document it or talk about it, it still acts on us the same way that it will, right? Because it's part of nature. And they're like, yeah. And I said, well, justice works the same way. It's inherent in nature. The only thing is it can be properly revealed to us so that we understand it better, so that we do things in concert with justice, rather than things that are not in concert with justice, and therefore we create conflicts instead of avoiding them. And, I have these people that vehemently deny with me that that's it. No, justice is what apparently some guys in some suits and ties write down, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. With the proper organization, if they document this stuff, that's what justice is.
So that means justice changes all the time.
Yes, it's not universal because, in 300 years ago on this land, it was something different than it is today. And in different countries, it's something different because they all have their own sets of rules. So it's not universal. Apparently, is what I'm been told more than once.
Something tells me you disagree with that.
Yeah, I have trouble with that. I mean, so basically,
if I can chime in here for a second,
do it.
Among all the other things that you've expounded my mind about, Tom, I don't know that much of us had much teachings about natural law.
Yeah.
So
I would
maybe I'm going to defend these people that are having these conversations with you because you've helped me to see that I guess there is such a thing and that there's sort of an inert expectation that, how we treat one another and rules of communicating and
relationships,
being civil and relationships and so forth. But I guess I never thought that there were natural laws to that, but you're right. So I think it's a foreign concept to a lot of people.
I think it definitely is. I knew nothing about it until, 15 years ago or something. Never really thought about it. If you would have asked me, say, 20 years ago, what's justice, I probably would have given the same answer. It's whatever the laws say is what it is. So the real thing is essentially people are speaking out of ignorance. Instead of stopping and listening and going, okay, wait, I've never heard this before. Did you just make this crap up? Or where's this come from? Or give me some more support for what you're claiming here, because it seems to have no foundation. I think
that was my reaction when we first started talking.
Yeah.
Was that kind of, where's this coming from? What is the basis of this? So I don't know what it was for you. I know for me, there was a lot of having my inconsistencies pointed out to me for a while until I just couldn't deal with that anymore. Until I started then to kind of let some of it simmer for a while and realize that there was some reason and logic and kind of, I don't know, I guess you would say axiomatic stuff, or some stuff that is really no, some of these things really are inherent in nature. They're logical conclusions that really can't be refuted.
Right.
But it was really just having to be so frustrated by my own inconsistency for a while.
And that's where I went. I basically went in this discussion, and I didn't go very far at all on that first thing. Then I did a follow-up 2 days later. I talked to this person, and because I didn't want it, but I'm going to jump aside because that's what I do all the time. I listened to a very recent podcast from Tom Woods. He had a psychiatrist, I don't know, some psycho dude. I'm sure he's not going to appreciate. Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, H-A-I-D-T was the guest name. And his was basically, the discussion was, well, wait a minute, are you telling me that reason and logic doesn't rule the day? Right? Because otherwise, obviously, libertarians think they have a superior argument. So all they have to do is lay out the argument, and bingo, we win. I'm doing the quotes because it's not about winning, but right? That's the short version of it. But it doesn't work, right? That's why does it not work? And that's what this psycho dude who was on the show, Jonathan Haidt, and he said that's because I can't remember. He explained there's like 3 modes of discussion, and he says and the reason that there's mostly men in this.
Oh, okay, clue me in. Yeah, I ask this question all the time.
Because
where are the women?
Yes, exactly. That we need to do a whole show on this, but
cool.
He said. It's mostly men because again, the 3 types of discussion, and I can't recall them, but one of them is basically attack mode. And
women don't.
Yes,
do well with that.
That's right. See, and men do. And he said, like, read an article on the internet and then look at the comments. The comments usually don't really add to anything. They just basically say, "Well, you're an idiot. You're a dum-dum. You don't understand simple stuff," or, "Oh, yeah, that'll never work." Or, it's this constant back and forth of basically, I'm smarter than you. I'm a show-off. I'm showing off because I'm smarter than you. And he said that does not convince people. So he said, and I'm way off the topic now, but that's where I always am. He says, like, if a so-called liberal today says, "Well, how are we going to help the poor? I'm concerned about the poor people." He said, you should basically start with, "I share your concern of the plight of the poor." Now, the question is that my concern after that is, am I willing to steal from someone to, quote unquote, help that person? Right? Am I willing to do something immoral to help them? Or would we better off to just do something moral to help them? Mm-hmm. Right? So you get them on your side by saying, yeah. So anyway, how you do this. So now I'm back to my discussion on the nature man. And I said, and of course I didn't practice this because I learned this afterwards. And just because I learn it doesn't mean I'll ever use it because I'm dumb and it'll escape me here in a week and it'll be gone. But I said, okay. So I left it at there's no, right? This person was unconvinced that there's a nature to man. So 2 days, 3 days passed, and I said, "Hey, I got a question for you. Let's do this. If one of the ways that I think that shows that something is inherent in nature, I'll say that you're a self-owner." Right? And they go, "Okay." I go, "Wait a minute, but there are 2 possible comments that you could make. You could say, 'Yes, I am a self-owner.' Or you could say, 'No, I'm not a self-owner,' which proves, in fact, you're a self-owner. That shows that this is inherent in nature. In other words, it's inescapable. You cannot back out of it." And she, I did say she. I already let that cat out of the bag. So 50% of the population just got wiped out as a possibility. The person I talked to.
All right. So, if you're talking to a woman, then it's probably, not to be sexist here, but there aren't many women in this movement or philosophy. And so I do find, I think that many times that you have to communicate differently.
Yes.
A little bit.
And overall, I would agree. Most people need to, myself especially, need to communicate differently because it's not working. Mm-hmm. I can look at it, I go, well, I don't have 8 billion listeners to the show. It doesn't work. Yeah. Now, I know there's other issues in that, but in general, the libertarian argument hasn't taken over the world in the last 30 years.
No.
So it's not working.
We're so misunderstood.
Yes. It's true, though.
No, but I'm relating to what you're saying because do you remember, we had our Liberty group, and for a long time there, I think you didn't think that I was catching on at all. And then this guy showed up at the group, and he was very concerned about the poor and things like that. And I started having a discussion with him, and I did really learn something about the communication because it was really, I think I learned it was about listening to what this person is very concerned about. And I could relate to that because I had certain things that I was really concerned about that were like sticking points for me or, roadblocks in my way where I could see your logic, but there were things that it was like, well, what about this? What about that? And things that bothered me. So yeah, I have found that I think it's really good when you talk to people to say, I hear you saying that your concern is
real.
Whatever it is.
And it's real.
Yeah, and it's real and it's legitimate and I've been there, and I think that leaves lines of communication open much more than, not like I said, not that I always remember. I mean, sometimes it's just you get in these conversations and you're just arguing. But if you do a good job, then you're going to stay on the same page and say, usually I'm concerned about the same thing. So we can talk about it.
Part of my problem is I do get too emotional about it. And I'll say to Trigger, which we're going to talk about him in a second. I don't like that. For me, it's always a mistake when I get emotional. Like when I'm trying to tell you something and I can see it's not getting through and I get frustrated. So I don't know, I speak louder, I speak faster, whatever I do. I'm really not getting, idea number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 to address it. I'm sticking with one and trying to pound it in, When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you.
Usually that's the point where you're talking and you've stopped listening.
Yes.
And
for me,
that's the hard part.
I feel it's always a mistake when I do that. And Trigger says, I love it when you get like that. Yeah. I'm like, no, I hate it. So anyway, I said, well, if you're having trouble with self-owner a little bit, because this person was a little like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I go, okay, I'm going to make one more short thing on this, and then Brad's going to continue with the show. But I said, what if I said to you, we can argue? Right? Again, you're faced with two possibilities as far as I can tell. You can either say, sure, we can argue. Let's go ahead and argue. Right? Or you could say, no, we can't. And I use that example because this person caught on real quick. They said, oh, wait a minute. If I say no, we can't, I'm actually arguing. So I'm actually proving that we can argue. I go, yes.
It's a trap.
Yeah, it came to the person on her own, and I go, okay, the same thing is with the self-owner thing. So I'm trying to show you that this is inherent in the world in which we live in. It's nothing that I came up with, or to my knowledge, some person came up with. Some person obviously at some point wrote it down and described it to us, but they're not credited. It's like, hey, if I write, W equals mg for gravity, right? I'm not credited with inventing gravity. Mm-hmm. I just wrote down an equation that describes it, hopefully properly.
Well, then I think I'm a practical enough person that once you kind of get that point, because I think it wasn't hard for me in the beginning to get that, but then to understand what are the examples of how this actually plays out in life, and can situations actually still be dealt with based on these principles?
Yes.
Are there exceptions? That kind of thing.
And I've later, and I don't know when this really hit me, I think this was a Stefan Molyneux, where he said, he basically kind of made this long argument, and he said, but here's the deal. The moral argument wins the day. The use of aggressive force is wrong. So if my garbage didn't get picked up on Thursdays, we'd figure out some other way to get it picked up, right? But I understand, most people are concerned about local things, will the number 2 pencil still be yellow? One guy's, could be we can't have freedom if they won't be yellow anymore. What are we going to do? Mm-hmm. To me, it's, I've played with Brad on the show many times, said, you're asking me the wrong question. I understand you believe that's the right question, but it's the wrong question. How would it work?
Yeah.
Because the reverse of that
I don't know. I always think it's a good question to ask, how's it working? So, okay, in general, what do you think of the morality of politicians and bureaucrats? And in general, what do you think of how things function when government runs them? If you could share those things with me. So then you're kind of acknowledging that maybe the system that you're advocating for isn't really working so well. It isn't, these people aren't moral, and it's not really efficient, or,
right.
So I know that's always the utilitarian argument, but still.
Well, when people will say, how would it work? I try to turn that around. Again, I'm not saying this is Jonathan Haidt's method. This is my method. I'd say, I turn the reverse around. So are you telling me that without the use of aggressive force and coercion, society may not function as well? Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm like, are you saying what makes society work is theft and murder?
You kept asking me questions like that, and that just really is annoying.
Right. See? So my method doesn't work.
You got to go home all confused and deal with your own inner demons and stuff like that. So
no, that's a good thing to bring out, because that is for me, is a very difficult thing to work through when you're going through that process. It's like, just like you said, well, some of the logic sounds good. It sounds like it makes sense, but I don't, in a sense, don't want it to be right because, where we are, I mean, this is the greatest country. We got Independence Day coming up. I'm going to make a comment here on this a little bit, but right, all this stuff. So I don't want to abandon where we are either. And I could see your point though, also that things aren't working, but the mindset, and we talked about this before the shows, but we could just, tweak those few things that don't work right.
Well, for me, it was if I'm going to abandon what I believe in, then I have to start over.
Yeah, it's a big job.
Yeah, that was overwhelming. And some members of my family, which shall remain nameless, are a little more intuitive than I am. So some members of my family were jumping in your boat a little quicker than me. And so they're ahead of me. And so then I'm really feeling frustrated because I'm just kind of not there yet. So, but that's a long story. We can tell that another time. We have. It's probably somewhere back there in the archives, isn't it?
It probably is. I'm sure it is.
And I'm sure Brad has his story too, as we all do.
So given all that about man's nature and the nature man that Brad commented on with us too, people see that the rules of the game are the ones that get written on a piece of paper, whether it be called the Constitution, the ordinances in your town, however, the laws of the state. But what I'm saying is they're really inherent in nature. And every time we write rules, when I say we, I am not them, so we's a bad thing. Every time it's written and you have to follow these rules. Every time those rules that depart from the nature of man, you actually create conflict. And basically you're forcing people to do something they wouldn't do voluntarily, and it creates frustration and ultimately conflict.
There's good examples in current events and things that have happened here lately where if you say it's one way, then one group of people is going to be upset, and then if you say it's another way, somebody else is going to be upset, and there really is no such thing as the people or no we. People are individuals. They have individual views and values, and
exactly.
You can't really speak for them collectively. So
yes, and so it's a mistake to make the attempt to do so. So that's the bottom line. So what I'm asking for people, especially for this show, I guess for every show, is listen to the following discussion. Question us in the event you understand that we have not been consistent in promoting justice and peace, or if you just have concerns about, maybe it's how that would play out, how would it work, or how is that in fact consistent? Show me how that's consistent with what you're claiming, that the use of aggressive force should not be legal, right? That's what I'm basically saying. So, the bottom line is, Brad likes to say, is we aim to make you think, so hang with us and listen to the discussion. We got a bunch of good stuff. So with that, I'll let Brad go. Where are we going? The announcements, Brad, I think?
Sure.
We finally made it to the announcements.
Yes. Thank you. And that's it for the show.
Do you want to talk about last week and a big shout out for Trigger?
Yeah. It was fun. I just wanted to let Trigger know that we appreciate him filling in for us last week. It's always fun to hang with him. He did with me the I guess the conclusion of the 3-part discussion. I can't remember the name of the actual article, but the shows were Anne Frank, Edward Snowden, and Justice.
You're a criminal in a mass surveillance world.
You're a criminal in a mass surveillance world, and it's something like How Not to Get Caught or something, I think is the second part or something like that.
Trigger was really subdued last week. I noticed he just seemed really chilled out and calm.
Yeah.
was he?
Yeah.
What was going on there, Tom?
Yeah.
He was. You know how those libertarians are.
Yeah. Whoa, dude.
He was just seemed like he was just very calm and just.
He did a great job.
That was great. I it's fun to listen to you guys together, and it's neat the different groups, or different kind of combinations. I really enjoyed Brad. I really liked listening to you and Tom and Tim. It was several shows. Several shows back? That was great. A really good show. It's cool when it gets mixed up and
I like
different combinations of people on the show.
I like the variety, the variations. Alex is fun sometimes.
Yeah,
when he's on
Alex
the show.
does a great job. So, it's cool.
So thanks, Trigger.
Give yourself also a pat on the back there, Tanya.
Well, thanks. Well, you guys always say such nice things about me, but I enjoy listening to all of you, and I'm not on the show too. So.
Well, I like it that new listeners are like, okay, wait a minute. Tanya equals Northwood's mom. Trigger. Who's Trigger? His real name is the Lone Ranger.
No, that's his name. His mom named him Trigger.
Trigger. And I have also given him another name, Juicy Tin.
Do you ever think, see, we never really share a lot about ourselves personally. You know, we may actually want to kind of like start to share a little bit of kind of bio.
I share nothing on me because nobody really cares.
Yeah. Tom's in the witness protection program.
Hey, you're not far from that here because we're going to talk about this in a second. But so I'll move on with the announcement for the second one. I'll do it because I'm going to tell. I would just want to give a shout out to Paolo Fabrizio and the Ontario Libertarian Party for putting on their annual summer picnic. They basically invited me and I showed up. Maybe that's more apt. It was an awesome time. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I just wanted to give the shout out to Paolo. Just thank you.
Hey, Paolo.
Yeah, very cool.
Wish I could have been there. Cool.
Yeah, way to go with that, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the announcements, I'll go quickly.
Yep.
AgriFest 2015 is at the Villa Marie Conference Center and Retreat. September 24th to 27th, we keep talking about this, but please save the date and check it out. It's southwest of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And a great bunch of folks. Our good friend Nick Ludwig is one of the organizers, and we look forward to it.
Coming up. It's not that far away anymore.
It's not.
So you guys are going to be broadcasting from there again then this year?
We shall be broadcasting live.
Very good.
In honor of Frederick Bastiat's recent birthday,
yes.
Here's a quote that, from Tom. The state is the great fiction through which everyone endeavors to live at the expense of everyone else.
Aha.
There's some deep thinking there.
Bastiat. Yep. Read the law. Read Bastiat for sure.
The law, and it's short.
That's a good starting point. If you want to read something.
Just so you know, Dr. Walter E. Williams, that was the turning point for him. He read the law.
That was probably the first. That was probably the first book that I read on my journey.
Cool.
Check out our Facebook page, the Annoying Peasant Radio, and for a variety of postings. You guys do a great job of posting various things. Thanks to Tanya, Tim, and Cassie for their efforts on that. Our next live show will be next Tuesday evening, July 7th at 7 p.m. Central Time. Contemplating a number of topics, so please join us. We're going to keep you in suspense.
Yes. Which really means I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Who's on the docket for
I love it.
Possibly Tim next week.
So I'm going to come back on something Tanya said. I think it's a great idea so that we're forthright. I think it would be really good for us to talk about maybe a little bit about ourselves so people don't think we're these anonymous freaks that live in our parents' basement.
Yeah, well, maybe we are, but, at least then you'll know. So.
Case, don't you guys live in your parents' basement?
Yeah, in my case, I couldn't leave.
No.
But no, I think that's a good point. I think we have kind of, from time to time, maintained a little bit of anonymity to this, and we're all very forthright with our opinions and our beliefs. So with that, maybe we should be as forthright with what happens and who we are individually.
From the female point of view on the show, I think that is a way in that you can relate more to women. At least that's what works for me.
The personal connection.
Yeah, like if I watch a movie or something with my husband that's maybe like some war movie or something I'm not all that interested in. It's sort of those personal relationships and character development and stuff that I kind of get into. So knowing a little more about people personally does pique my interest. So.
That's a problem with women. You guys are so deep.
We are.
Guys are just like, wow, shut them up. Check out that
one. Yeah.
You just don't understand.
Yes, we don't.
Take notes, Tom. A little bit of a little babe insight.
Yeah, I know. But I just could never follow through. That's my problem.
So who wants to share first? Just tell us about yourselves. No.
Here's what I'll share.
Okay.
My meeting at the Libertarian Picnic.
Yes, we want to hear about that.
Oh gosh, that was such a good time. Let me start with how. Okay, so I drive from here to my mother's in Racine, spend the night, spend the next.
Tom has a mom, so we know
I have
something
a mom.
about Tom.
I was not hatched.
Okay.
I actually do have a mother. Anyway, The second night, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So I get up early, like local time. I left about 5 to cross the border, and because I figured I had about 4.5 hours to the event location, just north of Toronto is where I was going. So I'm crossing the border, actually Windsor, Ontario, right across from Detroit. So one of the first questions that the border guard, the Canadian border guard, so there's nothing with the U.S. You just pay your $5 to go across the Ambassador Bridge. On the other side, of course, you're in Canada, and the Canadian Mounties there started asking you questions, right? And I can't remember what I was going to tell you was the first question, but I wind up getting, where are you going? Who are you going to see? How much money do you have? Do you have over $10,000 with you? I wanted to say I wish, but I just said no.
Probably best to not.
Contraband, weapons, alcohol, firearms, blah, blah, blah. Like it had a little pocket knife. I said, hey, does this count as a weapon? I don't, I'm so dumb. When they ask you, do you have a weapon? Is everything a weapon? I'm not sure what a weapon is anymore. I don't know how to answer the question. Because I'm going to wind up saying no, and he's going to go, hey, you got a number 2 pencil back here. You didn't tell me that. And I'm like, yeah, I did tell you that because it's a pencil.
I have a 2-year-old. A number 2 pencil is definitely a weapon.
Okay. So anyway, the guy winds up saying, who are you going to see? So I tell him, okay. And he says, well, what's your common interest? Why are you going to see this person? I said, well, I really didn't know how to answer that question. So I said, economics. I go, I know, boring, right? Smooth, right? He goes, oh, no, that could be interesting. And so where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. So he winds up saying, in the end, this is, so I'm holding up the whole line now because he's typing on some computer while he's talking to me. He's in like a booth, like a toll booth looking thing. So he winds up saying to me, so you're telling me you met this person basically online and you're driving like 8 hours to go to a picnic for possibly just the day for a few hours, and then you're going to turn around and come back. And I said, yes. He says, I simply don't believe your story.
Buying it.
And I said,
really?
Yeah. I said, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, do you want me to embellish? I mean, I didn't say that, but I was like, I don't know what else to say. He just, he basically asked me what I was doing. I told him. And he said, I don't believe your story. So he puts this little piece of paper in my passport, gives it back to me, and he says, you're going over there for secondary questioning. So to make a long story short, which it is a long story, but I'm in there for about 40 minutes. They basically asked me all the same questions. In the end, the guy hands me the passport in secondary questioning. By the way, it's all under roof. It's raining, but it's under roof. So I figure, they're going to come out and they're going to search my car. They're going to do all this stuff. Never search my car. Basically asked me almost entirely the exact same set of questions. And then there was it seemed like 5 minutes, maybe it was 2 or 3 minutes of silence. Guy typing, I hear the keys, and he winds up handing me the passport, and he says, you're good to go.
So you didn't crack under pressure and confess all kinds of crimes.
Yeah, I didn't. I was amazing, I have to say myself. Anyway, and there was no welcome to Canada or, thanks, for answering the questions or nothing. It was just, you're good to go. So I said, hey, there was a little piece of paper that the other guy put in my passport. Do I need to have that piece of paper? And he says, no. Well, I'm thinking, okay, when I cross the U.S. border, either later today or the next day, is a guy going to ask me and I'll say, hey, no, the other guy said I didn't need it. No, he didn't say that because you need it. And I'm, so I'm like, well, I could be screwed now. I don't know their procedures. Goes to, I don't know the law. Everyone's a criminal, right?
I remember when I was a kid, going to Canada was like going through the drive-thru. Just like, hey, glad to be here.
Yes. So anyways, I go to the thing, meet some fantastic people, very nice people. Paulo was just constantly, watching me. Tom, is there anything you need? Is there anything you want? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, he was just so nice to me, cool. Introducing me to everybody. I mean, I could see hey, there's a guy over there. He came from Wisconsin. You need to go talk to him.
So is he going to drive down here and visit us now?
He says he loves Cheeseheads. He wants to come down here and see us. He's been in
a big cookout or something.
Yeah, we got to do something. But we'll get it figured out. So anyway.
Like 3 or 4 of us.
So
we don't have a group.
We have a great time, and I'm going to get to one of the discussions I had. We have a wonderful time. Paulo winds up giving me 3 1-pound bags of espresso. And I'm like, what?
Oh.
He goes, oh, it's not from me. He says, it's from Liberty Rules Radio. I go, I mean, I'm not real smart, Paulo, but you're Liberty Rules Radio, so they are from you. He goes, well, yeah, whatever. He says, next year we're going to have more stuff to give away. I'm like, you don't need to give me stuff. He goes, oh, no, take it. He says, hey, but there'll be nothing going across the border on your way back. But make sure you tell them that you got these 3 pounds, because they're going to ask, and tell them retail value like $10 a piece. Okay. So it's raining that afternoon. I do all these discussions, and I'll talk about one here in a second. And I wind up going back. I get to the border, and I think this is going to be. They all told me this is going to be a cakewalk. They won't even ask you anything. Don't worry about it. But if the only thing you want to mention is the 3 pounds of espresso.
That just sounds suspicious. Yeah. I'm driving 8 hours to see this guy I've never met before, and he gave me 3 bags of stuff.
I was thinking they were going to open that and go, coffee, what's in there? Yeah, what's in those bags?
Were those white powder?
You would think they didn't even look at them. They didn't even say, hey, show me one of the bags. I mean, nothing. But here I am again at the U.S. border now. I'm actually already across the bridge. And I get almost all the exact same questions, and the guy says, I don't believe your story.
Oh, no.
I'm getting the exact same thing. And I'm like, and I did say to him, I don't know what else to tell you.
But nobody cares about your bags of espresso?
No, I told him about them, and I thought he was going to say,
nobody's concerned.
Well, I'm thinking a drug deal, right?
Yeah. Right.
He even asked me,
Do people go to Canada to do drug deals? I don't know.
He says to me.
I guess they have like cheaper prescription drugs there, don't they?
I guess.
Maybe it's that. Yeah.
He asked me, are you currently employed? I said, no. Right? I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question, so I say no. He says, oh, well then how did you fund this trip? So then I got to kind of back up and say, well...
We're getting more and more personal information about Tom.
I should have said, my wife is a really hard worker and left it at that.
I don't believe your story.
Yeah. He wouldn't believe my story. So he's typing there on this computer for a while. Again, there's silence for a while. And he does say, he hands me the passport, and all he says is, welcome back. He did say that. Oh. Yeah. It was a young guy, like 20, 25 years. So anyway, I couldn't believe how, and I guess most people think I'm kind of a patient guy, and I feel very impatient when I'm there. I'm like, hey, because we asked, how do you fund this trip? I want to say, it's none of your stinking business. That's what I wanted to say to anything to him. Do you have weapons? I want to say, well, if I do have weapons, it's not a crime to have weapons, or it shouldn't be a crime to have weapons. I'm not threatening anybody. I'm not doing anything, right? Is what I want to say. So that every single question I got on both sides of the border, I really wanted to be sassy, but I thought, well, I don't want to spend, 3 days sitting here at the stinking border either in a jail.
Yeah, but everything's a crime and everyone's a criminal.
Exactly. So. That's so perfect for this. That's why I wanted to explain what happened to me. I couldn't believe it. I wanted to say, is Canada at war with the United States, or is the United States at war with Canada? Am I not aware?
Did war break out?
Yeah, did something happen? And then, the guys were telling me that, well, the guys who broke out of the jail in New York City were very near the Canadian border. There was the 3 terrorist attacks, one in Tunisia, one in France. I can't remember where the other one was on that. Was that a Thursday or on a Friday? I think those happened on Friday.
You're asking me?
Yeah, I think. So they might all have been on heightened alert, and there was some hubbub that, stuff might happen over 4th of July weekend. So maybe they were extra, in a questioning much more because of that. I don't know. So I don't know if that's normal or not. They asked me, have you crossed a border before? And I was like, again, I don't know how to answer the question. Do you mean, have I crossed the border right here at this border crossing? Or are you asking me if I've ever been in Canada before? And they kind of look at me like I'm being a smart ass.
I'm like, trick question.
Yeah, I don't know how to anyway. So anyway, so here I am. I'm in all my glory because I'm around all these libertarians of varying degrees of the small L to capital L.
So you've copped an attitude by now, is what you're saying.
No, I was over it because it was like 4 hours later, and I finally got to the picnic, and I was just happy to be there and great to see those people. But there was one conversation that I wanted to kind of recount. There's a gentleman, maybe my age, a little older, I don't know for sure. And he was talking to this younger guy, and the younger guy was obviously in the Libertarian Party up there too, and he was asking, hey, this is the major financial meltdown going to happen in my lifetime? And this guy was explaining that, no, I don't think so, because of this, whatever. It was a long, drawn-out, detailed conversation. And then I actually didn't happen to agree with him, but it's just prognostication. So, and that would have been my comment. I never commented on that whole discussion, but my comment would have been, it's just prognostication. It could happen tomorrow, or it might be, 50 or more years. I don't know when it would happen. I mean, if it would have, my guess, I would have said it would have happened years ago, but it hasn't. So that's how wrong I am. But who knows? But so then I run across this article, and the thing is, what was it? I'll put it on the Facebook page. It was from LouRockwell.com. I think it was yesterday. It was posted on there. And the bottom line on this article was he was kind of addressing this whole point, and the deal is that the Fed, and I would also argue many other central banks, have actually painted themselves in a corner now. Because they don't allow free markets to operate in the banking industry, basically. They see interest rates as a dial, and they play with the dial to make the economy, to stimulate it or to slow it down. They think it's actually quite that simple.
All right.
Tanya has the article up there.
I will post it right now. Keep talking.
Okay. So this is what I think is fundamentally different from years past and other claims that, nothing's going to happen, it'll be fine. And I just want to read a short quote from this article that I think adds some credence to my position here. It says, the BIS, and I can't even remember what that is, claim that central banks have backed themselves into a corner after repeatedly cutting interest rates to shore up their economies. And I would argue they, in fact, don't shore up their economies by doing so. All they do is temporarily stimulate them, but that's another issue. These low interest rates, I'm back to the quote, these low interest rates have in turn fueled economic booms, encouraging excessive risk-taking. I agree with that. Booms have then turned to busts, which policymakers have responded to with even lower rates. Claudio Borio, head of the organization's monetary and economic department, said, persistent, exceptionally low rates reflect the central bank's and market participants' response to the unusually weak post-crisis recovery as they fumble in the dark in search of new certainties. The point is, they've got the interest rates at zero. If something were to happen, what tool do they now have at their disposal? In other words, they've been running with the pedal to the metal the whole time. If something happens, they can't accelerate anymore. There's nothing they have left to do. So I think it's much more dangerous, would be my point now, than it was 10, 20, whatever, years ago. So I think that was something that was missed in that conversation that happened at the picnic that I think is very important.
Oh, wow.
So
I get a little frustrated, I think, talking about those things, because I think this is one of those areas where, while sometimes I tend to be a practical person, this is one area where I don't know if it's practical or not. Maybe it's more philosophy. I guess my response to these things about what's going to happen, or, because some people are way like, we're preppers because we got to be ready because this collapse is going to happen. I'm more like, sure. What's your philosophy? What do you believe in is where you need to start and what you need to know. Get your philosophy,
get your head straight,
established, and then say, okay, based on that, what's plausible? And then if you feel that you need to prepare for something or whatever you need to do, then do so, but do so out of knowing why you think what you think. Fantastic point. So I like that. That's always my gold star for Tanya. Thank you. With that, I want to move on. 4th of July, Independence Day in the U.S. Oh, I have a comment on that. On the bank thing? No, on the 4th of July. Do it. Actually, this is from my husband. This is from Lucas.
Okay.
Okay. He has a question.
Uh-oh.
He has heard from many different sources that freedom isn't free, and he wants that explained to him. That's what he came home with today. He says, freedom ain't free.
Yeah, freedom.
So tell me, what is it then?
Okay, to my audience of Lucas, it's just some saying you've heard. And yeah, I think what most people refer to is that the bloodshed that has typically happened over gaining your freedom, right? I think that's what they're referring to.
I suppose so.
Yeah, but, you probably hear that comment from people who really don't understand, in my view, what freedom is, nor do they really care. They really don't have any interest in the topic, so they say this stuff. I don't know why exactly, but I just thought it was interesting because I do think the Declaration was one of the best written American documents. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm saying it's one of the best written. So I wanted
There are some good principles there.
Yes, and the notion of natural laws in there. And I'm trying to tie with what I said in the beginning here. There's a little method to this madness here.
What kind of sticks with me, though, with the freedom isn't free thing is just that it seems to carry with it the idea that your freedom comes from someone else, or you owe it to someone else, or that someone has had to sacrifice something for it. Well, I do understand the sentiment behind it, but if it's not inherent in nature, if it's not inherent in man, I guess it's that idea that somehow someone gave it to you. You weren't just born that way.
Yes,
that's what sort of bugs me.
Yeah, that's what people think, and I would argue, of course, you are born with it, but there are psychopathic maniacs who want to control your life. So they seize the authority to tell you how to live. And now you got to get back from them. You have to...
I suppose if somebody literally fends off the psychopathic maniacs on your behalf, then maybe you would owe them
debt.
Something. I don't know.
That's
the psycho dudes.
It's interesting. I'll go with I'm just going to read this kind of quickly. It's a bit of a longer paragraph, but I think it's very important with the upcoming holiday here. Saturday, I think it is, right?
Yes.
And again, it was one of the better written pieces in American, I was going to say history. I don't know, I guess history. But anyway, this is interesting. It says, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, by the way, I had to memorize this in like 8th grade. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Right. So that whole first part is talking about, obviously, mention the laws of nature, but basically why you need to get rid of tyrannical government, if you would, right? And they say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. And to me, that's another way of saying inherent in nature, that all men are created equal. And I think this is misunderstood. All men are created equal in legal standing, is what they really should have added on there to be clear. It's not that all men are actually equal, right? Some guys are taller than other guys. They're not the same, but which also means some fellows are going to be more productive. If you were in a free society and you couldn't do it illegitimately, some people will be more productive. They'll have more stuff. They'll have created more wealth than others. So they're not... I
think the Declaration, though, was speaking to a more educated society, and so it was a little more understood what the word equal meant, where...
Yes.
As we may be schooled, but not educated.
I agree, totally. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable, which means inseparable, essentially, rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which was life, liberty, and pursuit of property was John Locke, if I remember right. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving, this is important, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, you have to give consent. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, right? Don't do it on a whim. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer. This is also very important. Experience has shown, basically, that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. Right? In other words, people will just take it because it's like too much work to change everything. Right? But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, blah, 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 blah. And then they list all the grievances that they basically had against the king. But I just thought that was important because it alludes to natural law, which is something we talk about here. And again, when you believe that the government has become abusive, essentially, it's not just your right, it's actually your duty to throw off such a government. And the question is, how do you do it if you've come to believe that the government is now tyrannical?
You vote real hard?
You vote really hard. I mean, when you pull that lever, you just yank on it or something. I don't know. So anyway, I thought that was...
Maybe there's some other ideas which we discuss
yes,
at length.
We have
episode after episode. So,
but I just thought that was important to bring that forward here at 4th of July, because I think most, at least in my experience, the large majority of 4th of July is basically flag waving. We're the greatest. We're free.
Well, they said all that stuff and did all that stuff so you can eat fried chicken and drink beer.
There you go. That's why you had the day off.
And put up red, white, and blue decorations.
And put up red, white, right? All this stuff. And again, people don't understand their freedom, which obviously is what the show's about. But what I'm trying to highlight here today.
I like to know why I do what I do. If I'm going to do it.
I think it's important. Yeah.
It's important to me.
Yeah. And I'm amazed that I think to a lot of people, it's just not. It's just, it basically becomes a ritual for them. It's just what I do.
Yeah, that's right. It's a ritual. It is. And, you know, you can have traditions and you can enjoy family days and things like that. But, you know, if you're going to participate in some of these traditional activities and things that we do, to understand why you do it.
Yeah, you should at least have mention of this. Usually the day goes by without even mentioning it.
Right. And I am more inclined to be okay with celebrating some aspects of the Declaration of Independence more so than not necessarily celebrating the Constitution.
I'm with you.
Not that those principles aren't kind of there throughout, but I don't know. Read Lysander Spooner. We could go on for a long time there. But yes, that those principles or those ideas I think are correct.
Yes.
And worth celebrating.
And worth revisiting.
Worth pondering.
Anything, Brad, that you want to add to that one?
I like the comment that you guys made about, you know, so what do you do if you... I think we're all conditioned. You guys, you taught me that I'm indoctrinated to our current system. And so I think that it's hard to think outside of that indoctrination. And so when you said just a few minutes ago about voting hard, I think that that's really what people feel, is if they're not happy or satisfied with the outcome of new things going on with the government or things going a direction that they don't want it to go, they're like, well, my team just isn't doing a good enough job to get the votes we need so that we can overpower your team.
Right.
But I don't think people see it that way. I think they see it as, well, you win or you lose, but you can't all win or lose. And I think that that's a distinguishable difference in the philosophy that the three of us believe in, is that we can all win all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
You do that in the marketplace every day.
But that's so utopian. How can that be?
That's another. Where did I do this one? I had this discussion with someone of the female persuasion. We'll just leave it at that. And we went through this whole progression of this, the basic discussion.
To be a theme here, Tom.
Yeah. I'm always talking to chicks. I'm no dummy.
No,
we need to talk to Lisa, I guess, about this.
And the conversation in part goes, so what you're saying is if this free society were to come about, it wouldn't be perfect. I said, no, because there'd probably be muggers, rapists, thieves. They still exist. They all would not become angels instantly with the flip of the switch. And you're like, well, it's not going to be perfect anyway. What's the point, right? Why do that? So then later we're going, we go off on another thing. We go for a while, and then the comment is to me, well, wait a minute. What you're trying to propose is, perfect, and perfection's never going to happen. So why even try? So then I stopped and I said, hey, so here's the deal. You object because at one point you felt it was imperfect, and that's stupid to pursue something that's imperfect. Then the next comment, 10 minutes later is, what you're trying to propose is perfection, and it's not attainable. So you shouldn't propose that either. So I shouldn't propose anything that's imperfect, and I shouldn't propose anything that's perfect. The bottom line is I should propose nothing. Just shut up, and the way it is great. Just let it go, right? The point is people don't see they don't understand what they're actually arguing. I mean, I think some percentage of society would say, yeah, I guess I don't want to make an argument that says I'm for something and then 10 minutes later say I'm against that same thing. They would like to say, no, I'm going in this general direction. I know a lot of people don't even care. It's of no consequence to them, but some do.
I don't say anything at all until I know for sure. Yeah. That's why you thought I didn't get it for so long.
So
I just keep my mouth shut. No, so I don't sound stupid.
No. But it's interesting to see how people. What I see is, again, this is an example of, I can't remember like combat mode of guys, right? How they argue, and then the person who sees themselves in defense mode is also in combat mode, and you lose track of having a sensible argument at that point. I think it's just another example of that, something I went through.
I think asking good questions, that's the most important thing, because that's what really kind of keeps you able to think instead of just kind of shutting down and going on the defensive.
Yeah, I think what's important is, what I try to do is lay out the very basic idea. And then it's always, how would this work? How would that work? Which is, in a sense, is fine. I argue also it's the wrong question, but it's fine because I don't know if we're having this discussion, what hang up you actually have. So you need to bring that out, and you really need to just do it in your head of going, okay, I kind of agree with the basic premise, but I don't want it to be true, but I don't know how to square it. And then you just need to wrestle with it, right? And so when I keep talking or arguing with somebody about it, it is kind of pointless. You need to just chew on that for a while.
Yeah. And you do that. I learned from that. That's good, because it is hard not to get caught up in that, trying to prove your point.
Yeah. It's a bit of a superiority complex. Mm-hmm. And I think libertarians suffer from that a little bit. Basically, I know something you don't know. Mm-hmm. It's like you just got to throw out the idea.
It's easy to go on the defensive because people are generally telling you you're a complete idiot and that can't work at all. And if you have a little bit of pride, then you're kind of defending yourself.
That's very true. And I think I found myself in that place numerous times where they basically, you're the biggest dope I've ever met.
I know. It's not fun when someone's standing there just calling you an idiot and claiming that you have no clue.
Right. And then you're highly motivated to defend yourself. Yeah. And then you start pointing out the inconsistencies on the current system, and it even gets uglier from there.
And carry on, right?
So do you think that our founding fathers, if I can use it that, if I can phrase it that way and call them that wrote the Constitution, don't you think that there were a ton of people that, if they'd have had discussions with them about, hey, we're going to write this Constitution and get rid of these wacky British dudes that are trying to run and tax everything, do you think that they would have had a groundswell of people going, that's a good idea, yeah, that'll work? Or do you think that there were a bunch of doubting Thomases going, hey, no, you can't do that?
I'm sure there was. It was the people who benefited under the king's system, right?
Exactly.
The pets, the pawns of the king who were stationed in these 13 colonies, who obviously were gaining advantage from it. They were certainly against this whole independence thing.
Well, everybody who stands something to lose
there you go.
A lot, it makes sense that you would support the status quo. It doesn't necessarily mean they're evil people. It's just that if you have a great fear that you're going to lose your livelihood or, whatever, that's scary.
And this is something I wrestle with also. Does it mean that they're immoral? And you say, if you don't understand really what you're arguing, and you're actually arguing for an immoral position, but you don't understand that, are you immoral? Right?
I don't know.
It's hard to say. You're not consciously immoral, but you're subconsciously immoral. You're, that's interesting.
That kind of relates to our topic. You have no evil intent.
Yes. Except for you're executing evil.
Right. But out of ignorance.
Yeah, it's hard. And then when you bring this idea to people, they don't want to listen to you. It's like, well, you have the position, well, I can't help you, but actually it's not that I can't help you. I can't stop you from hurting me. Right? I'm trying to stop the oppressors, and I'm not able to stop it anyway.
Hey, we never even got through our introductory stuff, and we've already been on for an hour. Did you notice that?
I know. I saw that. We're just.
So should we go for the longest show of all time?
Yeah, it looks like we're going there.
See, I have quotes of the day. I have stuff. I'm going to miss all.
No, we're going to get to that. I'm going to zip through this. This Greece default thing kind of interests me because.
I don't read the news, so you'll have to inform me.
All right. So how many years ago?
I read a little bit.
A number of years ago, the European Union is created. I had discussion with some of my relatives who were in Germany, and I said, basically, this ain't going to work. And they said, oh, no, this would be a great thing.
Well, I don't even read the news, but it's not been looking good for a real long time, and I'm not even informed. So,
which basically means when you form a big union, the stronger economies are going to support the weaker economies. Right? I mean, that's going to happen. The strong economies say, well, if that's the case, why would stronger economies do it? Because they want what the perceived protection of creating this big union. And the weaker economies want the economic benefit. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's why differing economies or societies join together. But anyway, the bottom line is this week is that banks in Greece have closed for the entire week. The max you can withdraw, a citizen can withdraw. This is what I find. A citizen can withdraw $70 a day. Do you think any of these government officials are able to withdraw more, or are they subject to the same rules?
It's possible.
Possible, yeah.
It's amazing. Government messes up, and then you can't have your money. That was sort of what really stuck out to me.
Yes. That's the point. I got a feeling.
I didn't mismanage my finances. I got money in the bank, man.
Right. But I can't have it. Right. The Greek stock exchange is closed all week. And here's the bottom line. Greece, which has received nearly 240 billion euros in two bailouts from the European Union and the IMF, International Monetary Fund, since 2010, they're going to default or miss a $1.6 billion payment to the IMF. And I believe that happens this next week, Tuesday.
Hasn't that never happened before? Like nobody's ever missed a payment?
Yeah.
I know that much.
I
read one article.
The case. But you think about this, it's a $1.6 billion payment on a $240 billion, right? So it's it's less than a 1%. I don't know. It's like 0.75% of the whole thing. They're supposed to make that payment, and they're not making that payment, and that's going to be the end for Greece.
Just not looking good.
No, I'm not saying it shouldn't be bad for Greece, but so, here's the deal. And according to a number of articles I read, and I'm not saying they're accurate, I'm just saying according to articles, a number of people said that when they joined, or a number of the countries, or representatives of those countries, when they joined, they thought that joining was supposedly an irreversible process. So what does this mean for voluntary association? It's not a voluntary association if it's a one-way deal? I just thought that was a whole interesting topic.
Can you volunteer yourself into slavery? We've asked that question before.
I just thought that was crazy that they actually, again, some of these representatives said this. I don't know what the actual country's position was because I don't know who speaks for a country. But how could it be an irreversible process? I mean, you couldn't even get kicked out? Right? It just seems wacky.
I guess we shall see.
But if that's the case, if Greece does get either leaves on its own accord or gets kicked out for whatever, will Spain or will other countries follow, and will the European Union cease to exist as we know it? And maybe it completely dissolves. I don't know. But, this is a weird way of putting this. As I see it, the problem for Greece, when they joined the IMF, and I know there's all kinds of other stuff that goes on that I'm totally unaware of. So, but in general, right, they gave up the power of the printing press because it's the European Central Bank essentially does it. So they can't inflate their currency. So when they get into debt problems, they can't just simply print more. Mm-hmm. So I think they're contemplating going back to the drachma. And I don't know, do you have to leave the European Union to? I don't know if that's the case because isn't Britain in the European Union, but they still have the pound? So I don't know how all this works, but say they stay in the union.
Well, it doesn't then going back and being able to inflate your currency. I mean, I'm not an economist, but it always seems to me that all that is buying yourself more time.
Absolutely.
Because if you inflate your currency, there's nothing real there. It's just sort of creating a bubble.
Exactly.
Which at some point has to burst.
But, okay, here's the weird thing in this case. I'm actually in favor of the trajectory of this move.
Okay.
That they go back to the drachma. Because it's the same deal on who has jurisdiction or whatever, or representation that we've had this discussion before. So I would favor, hey, that's the right trajectory. So keep it going. So let I don't know what they call it in Greece, every province have their own printing press. Right? Let them have their own currency.
Decentralization
exactly
is better.
And keep it going. You say, well, everybody's going to have their own currency. Well, of course not. They're just going to invest in a private currency of somebody at some point, or a number of them, and they'll compete, and they'll have better currency as a result. So the trajectory is a good one in my view, but I realize Greece, if they do this, they're not doing it because they're all for decentralization. They want to play with their own money. I get that. But, I don't think it will ever go further, but I would like to see it.
I think the pattern is, though, when things decentralize more and more, then you get closer and closer to a free market and competition. And this is so much there that we could talk about, but that there are organic ways that free market then rights itself.
Yeah, which is...
Whereas if it's a centralized economy, then it's just a bunch of guys pulling levers.
Yes.
And sometimes they screw it up, but there's a natural... I don't know what other word to use. Natural, organic way that economies repair themselves.
There's at least some level of competition between currencies, between countries. I'm not saying it's great competition. There's some level of it there. Mm-hmm. So that's better than having one currency over the whole thing, right? And obviously, you also have potential for chicanery on 10 levels instead of one if you do have but it's always... It's a
pretty basic concept, I think, as a libertarian, that it's like, if in doubt, decentralize.
Yes.
Divide.
So that's interesting to watch, to see, are we witnessing the collapse of the European Union or not, is the question.
We should do another show more on economics, and, you know more about that than I do, but it is interesting.
It is interesting, I think. Well, yes, we'll put that on the we always have this future plate of stuff we want to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
And here's where I got to get Brad going, though, on Supreme Court decisions from last week. All right,
okay.
And maybe is the big one the gay marriage thing from last week, I guess? I think it probably got more pub.
Yep.
For sure.
So your thoughts on that, Brad? Where are you on that? What do you think? Or your analysis of the commentary that's happened since then? Whatever.
Well, I guess my talking points this week have been to all those on either side of it, and boy, this is a very divided issue for sure.
Yep.
Is why should the government have a say that mandates who you can and can't fall in love with and marry? Why is that important to you? Why is it important that you oppose somebody who isn't going to maybe do as you would choose to do? And we've talked about this a million times on the show. It's to the point of, we could talk about, you can absolutely segregate against, middle-aged, gray-haired guys like us.
Yeah,
and we think that'd be just fine. Would it benefit them to do so if you were had this particular business interest, and that maybe it would benefit you, but that's up to you. So I think this whole thing gets so blown out of proportion, and frankly, the momentum of this thing just keeps going because the reaction that I heard and have been hearing is, now the right, the conservatives are working very, very hard. They're already anticipating that this could have been the ruling, and now they're going to go about, trying to muster up the support for and organize against or for a new amendment. So again, I'm going to use the law to get my way. Again, I'm going to vote harder for this. We're not working hard enough. We got outflanked on this decision, but boy, we got a way that we can do this another way, and we're going to take these steps to do so.
Well, for our listeners, in case they're unaware, and this is my interpretation of it, the Supreme Court basically ruled that states cannot make gay marriage illegal. Right? So it's not up to the states to decide. The Supreme Court decided it's legal. You cannot pass a law to make it illegal.
It's been centralized.
Yeah, it's been centralized.
So there's no more individual state decision making.
Brad's description is absolutely right. It's this divisive issue. Why? Because when the state decides, it's one way or the other. Right?
Right.
And that's the problem. Let the marketplace decide.
And we come from the point of view that there is no such thing as we the people. There are people who have all sorts of different views and values and things. So there's always just going to be one group on top and another one down being oppressed. And
minority.
I really see it as kind of sad because people think that they're celebrating freedom, but I see it that it's just kind of the group that's been in the majority. And I don't doubt that there has been discrimination and oppression going on. It is unfair when we are self-owners that if you say, this is the person I want by my bedside if I'm in the hospital, this is the person I want to inherit my property, these kinds of things, no one should ever be overridden because of some law. I mean, it's your life, it's your stuff. You can decide for yourself. So that is wrong, that is unjust. Okay, but it is never going to be like the Supreme Court gave a lot of lip service to like religious freedom. They talked a lot about this isn't going to affect religious freedom, but it already has. There's already been stories. I mean, in one particular business, the whole wedding cake thing, a family that lost their business because they did not want to participate in a gay wedding. They did not want to bake a cake. They turned down the job. Right. They were sued, and they were fined such a large amount that they lost their business. They would have no choice but to sell. And what I thought was really kind of sick and twisted about that is think about what's happening here. Okay, when we do something like this and we say, okay, now we're just going to say that this is good and this is what's the law of the land, and now if you have a different view or different opinion, it's fine. You can hold that opinion, but you can't do this. You can't refuse service to someone. Okay. What they've done is they've essentially taken the private property of one person and transferred it to someone who will hold the correct opinion, because there's no person who shares the beliefs of the family that lost the business who's going to be able to buy it, because they'd get in the same trouble and they'd lose the business also. So, it's already pretty much been a precedent that if you don't like this decision and if your conscience won't let you just go along with it, you will be at risk of losing your property, losing your business, these kinds of things. So you can't just say, oh, this is freedom because we've taken away this discrimination against people, which rightly people should own themselves and their own property and be able to make those decisions for themselves. We shouldn't stop them from doing that. But then by the government controlling that decision, you then oppress someone else.
Right.
You can't get away from it.
And that's absolutely what's happening here, because one of my high school classmates, very outspoken in his Facebook posts about his conservative Christian beliefs. Rock on, good for him. And he pointed out, his great disgust in one of his recent posts, which I always find to be very, very interesting, that now it's just a matter of time before one of your favorite churches that takes a stand and says, no, we're not going to marry a gay couple in our church, gets taken to court and also suffers those consequences. That's equally wrong. And like Tom and I, we all talk about, and you, Tanya, why do you want to go to such lengths to force such an issue where you're not welcome?
Right.
What's the point?
The point is flexing political power, right? I'm gonna have the law come down on you,
or victimization, or what have you.
Right.
And it seems like every group that ends up on top does not then remember what it's like to be on the bottom.
That's the point.
As soon as you get the power, it's all about the power. When
right.
you didn't have the power, it was all about getting the power.
Yes. The way to go about this, in my view, was to say, hey, here's the deal. Under the current system, a man and a woman who are married have a financial advantage. They have a number of other advantages, but recognized by the law. What we want to do is remove those advantages to put everybody on the same setting, and they can gain back, if you will, some of those advantages by just entering into some kind of contract. Like, we could be married, but if I want you to inherit my stuff, because it's not a legal marriage because it doesn't exist anymore, I just write a contract that upon my death, you get my stuff.
That's what it was like before we had state-issued marriage licenses. There was an article on Lou Rockwell about how we got the marriage licenses in the first place. And prior to that time, it was pretty much just if you said you were married, right. And you'd have written agreements and
right.
of your intent and these kind of things, just like what we're talking about. And a large part of why this came about was because people were upset that people were wanting to marry someone of a different race, and they didn't want that to happen. So it was really racially motivated.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just about control.
Sure.
And so it's like, okay, so government controls something and then gives one group of people an advantage, and then somebody else comes in and says, no, I want the advantage too.
Exactly.
And then we hail it as some kind of victory for freedom.
Right.
When the fight should have been to completely eliminate the power of government to license anyone's marriage. And I, for one, and nobody ever talks about this, I find it incredibly creepy and weird that we require a license for our most intimate personal relationships. I mean, maybe that's just my female point of view from I'm just like, that's just gross. Just no. Stuff that I don't really discuss my personal views and values about marriage with anyone really but close friends and family. I don't get into these big discussions. How is this like a national debate? I think that's just gross. So I don't know.
The quote,
am I nuts?
No, to your point, the quote I found on the internet today was really pertinent. It said, if marriage is a human right, why do you need a license?
Yeah, I mean, a license, there's so many things wrong with that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's just wrong. And so, yeah, I'm sad because people are claiming that this is about freedom. And I do understand that the experience for some people will be to experience more freedom because they have not had that opportunity. So, at some level that's there, but it's not overall more freedom. It's more control.
Okay. You have another comment? Because then we're going to get to Tanya's topic because we're just...
I don't know. Are we even going to make it there? And you've been kind of on this topic for a whole month. And I have quotes of the day, and I have stuff so that I just can't skip.
Yeah, we got to get to them because Tanya's got some good stuff. But
go ahead.
So I'll let Brad, you have the last word on this. Is there anything you want to add? Is there any comments on what we said?
Just on a personal note, I think you tossed the subject to me to comment first. I do have LGBT family members that I'm very close with and I care about very much. And
hey, LGBT is not a word. There's no vowels.
Yeah, sorry. But one of them, certainly when I heard of the ruling, I thought of them. And to me, I was like, oh, of course, I've evolved in my belief in our current system and find it to be peculiar that they're even spending the time to rule on such a thing, having said all that we've said. But I also recognize that there's nothing in my life that has made me feel, to date, so segmented or so outcast. And the emotional release of some of my family members certainly goes, I certainly acknowledge that that's something that they would feel, but I try to be very empathetic and try to understand other people's feelings. I couldn't draw anything of any relevance that's happened in my life to feeling as segmented out as they have felt. I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying I couldn't relate. I was like, well, okay, that's cool, but really, isn't it more how you personally want to believe, how you personally want to behave? Why do you need the government to tell you that it's okay?
Exactly.
All right.
And of course, you want the economic advantages, which I understand. I wouldn't.
I get that, yeah. And the case that brought this to the Supreme Court was over a gay couple, and I think that one of the partners was refused medical decision making or hospital rights.
Yes, I think it was something like that.
To visit their dying partner.
And these are going to be bigger issues because of Obamacare, because of kind of nationalizing the healthcare. That's going to bring a lot of these things to a head, I think.
Yes.
Also, so
the laws are going to be in conflict with themselves, and then Tanya's going to talk about what we're supposed to do then.
But I just think of all the incredible amount of energy, resources, everything that our country is throwing at this, frankly, wasting over something that should not be an issue.
Let's throw all our resources in to tell them it's none of their business.
Yeah, it's Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid. Never look at the root cause. Yeah. And again, I am not opposed to whoever marrying. Good for you. Marry
There's
whatever you want.
There's still a group, though. Think about people who forego state marriage licenses still do not have the advantages. I mean, I didn't question it almost 23 years ago now when I got married, but Luke and I definitely would question it now, and we'd have to ask ourselves, do we go for the state marriage license or do we forego that, which does leave you vulnerable legally? And that is still there. That hasn't been solved. If you say I don't want it.
23 years? You're just a newlywed.
Yeah, I know.
That's what I was
coming up. So, yeah, but we didn't question that at all. But like I said, for us, where we stand now, that would be a difficult, if we were getting married today, that would be something that we'd have to think long and hard about.
Yes.
But just know that I'm equally disgusted at criticism or persecution on either side.
Absolutely.
If you choose to practice and marry whoever you want to practice, or if you choose not to condone that, fine. I'm fine with it. But just leave each other alone.
I think this is going to play out in the market. It's going to play out in businesses. I don't think they're going to bother with trying to force churches to do stuff. I think the people are going to lose their businesses and livelihoods over it because that area seems to be fair game.
I think there will be some crusading LGBT couples that force churches into a corner.
I wouldn't be surprised.
That could eventually happen. I'm not sure.
But, again, this is different than how the free market works. You can hate Sony TVs all you want, right? And disparage them at every opportunity. But the point is, I go buy a Sony TV and own one. Mm-hmm. And you don't seem to be too bent out of shape about it.
Right.
It's like, so what? You got a Sony. Who cares? Which is essentially my view on the marriage thing. It's like,
right.
You're two guys married. You're two gals married. I don't care. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, hey, look, you married a goat. Whoops.
Yep. Mm-hmm. All right. Good for you.
And then it's also really disturbing to think that we would, if that really is a violation of someone's conscience, to participate in any way or condone that or whatever, that to then force someone into doing so is equally heinous. So
yes,
I think it's absurd.
Yes.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah. Yep. There was a couple other rulings we were going to talk about, but let's get Tanya on the front burner here because she has some really interesting stuff. And I apologize because what are we, like an hour and 25 into the show?
Yeah,
we're just
I don't
starting
even know
out.
how long are we going to be out here. See, but I can't skip this because there's an issue that I have to raise here before we get.
You do that, but I just want to say, we don't get Tanya here often enough. So when she's here, we got to get this in.
I'm kind of right now, like officially once a month, pretty much, if I can manage. And right now, that seems to be the last week of the month. Although next month, I don't think I can do the last week. I might have to see if I can bump to the first week. My kids have some theater commitments going on that are going to keep us quite busy. So we'll have to plan that. But no, and now this topic. You guys have been on this all month, and now I get my crack at it. And last week you're like, "Oh, we're wrapping this up," and I'm like, "No, but there's more."
So we're going to unwrap it a little bit, and then we're going to rewrap it up.
That I've been interested in a while. So for a while now, and it is, and I think it's a slightly different take on it, but it still tags right on to what you've been talking about for at least 3 weeks now.
Yes, 3 weeks.
Right. But first of all, see, before we get into that, I have a quote of the day. Okay.
All right, here we go.
And you guys have to guess who this is from.
Oh,
and this is on the topic of government agents who are just doing their job.
Okay. Lysander Spooner.
They're basically saying, I just want the money. I don't care where it comes from. Who said that?
It's not Lysander Spooner.
Nope.
I'm gonna say it's somebody who's in Congress. Is that wrong?
Nope. Wrong.
Ludwig von Mises, because I don't know.
No, you give up?
Yes.
That was our friend Trigger last week on the show.
Hey, Trigger, you're being quoted.
Okay. So now, and then there's one more thing then that I would like to point out.
Okay.
Since I've quoted Trigger, that when I get quoted on the show, guess what I get quoted as saying?
I have no idea.
Things like dumbassery.
Yeah, well, that's because...
I quote you guys with all kinds of dignity and professionalism, and I get dumbassery.
Dumbassery was the best quote of the show ever. That's why.
So in the spirit of making up words, which is something that seems to be a tradition here, Tom, you've had a couple just in this show. I mean, I chose a word of the day for today from your past. From last week. Let me see if I can review what that was here. Believe the word was current eventy like.
Current eventy like. See?
Yeah, so when we cover current events, these are the current eventy like things that we like to talk about. But then just in this episode, you've added, I think you said it was psycho dudes.
Psycho dudes. Yeah.
What was the other one? There was one more. I can't even remember what it is. So anyway, I thought I'd just have a little bit of fun with you there. That I would quote Trigger, and I figured nobody was going to guess that.
Guilty as charged.
So quote of the day, word of the day. But turnabout's fair play. So if you guys make up words, I'm going to make fun of you too.
But dumbassery was so good.
And I will balance it with then quoting you in a very dignified way also.
All right.
All right, so that's my little bit of fun. But I don't even know where we're going with this topic, and I don't think we want to go on for a very long time. But you have been covering this article, and I pinned it to the top of the Facebook page. If you haven't read that, it's very good. You're a criminal in a mass surveillance world.
How not to get caught.
How Not to Get Caught by David Montgomery. And you covered, all of that article over several episodes of the show. I wanted to just take a little different take on it. I've been reading books, not so much articles. I haven't finished either one of them, but in a previous episode, we discussed a lot this By the People, Rebuilding Liberty Without Permission by Charles Murray.
Yes.
And so I got that from the library, believe it or not. And
excellent.
I'm reading that book. And then it's referenced in that book, and lots of other libertarian sources reference this book, 3 Felonies a Day.
Yes, they do.
How the Feds Target the Innocent by Harvey A. Silverglate. So I wanted to read those, and I've been doing so. So that's kind of how I got on the topic of how many different crimes there are and how likely you are to be a criminal. And then just kind of by coincidence, you got on this topic and was on this kind of for the whole month. And you focused a lot, I think, on like what to do about obeying immoral laws, like the Anne Frank thing, one episode. And then, a lot about the surveillance state and kind of how that always makes you a criminal because
it's just a question of detection.
Is always watching you. And this whole article is so good. I wanted to come at it a little bit more from the point of view of, I guess, I don't know, trying to sort of condense it down, I guess, is that, you've talked about how, or we talk about the law, then that's just a set of rules made by the government. So then crime would be defined as breaking those rules set by government. So if you break the rules that are set by government, that then defines you as a criminal.
Yes.
And we now exist in a state where we have so many laws, so much regulation, not just specific laws, but then this whole 3 Felonies a Day book was about these vague statutes that can just kind of be used to pin on anyone. Basically, we're at the point where you really can't, there's no way to even claim that you're a law-abiding citizen anymore because the law is incomprehensible, impossible to understand. The lawmakers and enforcers don't know it, don't understand it. The average citizen can't know it or understand it. And ignorance to the law is no defense.
Yes.
So where does that leave us?
Yes, and I think that's the crux of what you have to say here, and I think it's very important that there is no such thing as a law-abiding citizen. And I know a good chunk of people think, nope, I don't break any laws. Well, that's the whole point. You're breaking laws that you don't realize that you're actually breaking the laws. And then you say, well, there can't be a law against that. But in many cases, there is. Mm-hmm. Because what is the law? Again, like you said, just whatever some guys happen to write down and call it their rule book, right? And people, what freaks me out again is people don't object to this in a big way. Just like in the preamble to the Constitution, or to the Declaration of Independence there, we said that people basically have the propensity to just suffer instead of actually change the stuff. It's the same thing here.
Well, and the article talks about, and you talked about in past episodes, about the learned helplessness.
Yes.
It's so overwhelming that we do think there's just nothing I can do.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I have the answers. I probably don't as much. I've been trying to focus on the what can we do. Yeah. Maybe we could just kind of have a discussion about that. But, it is interesting that happens to us. But I like to take down assumptions. I've referred so many times to the show we did on representative government because we talk about things like we have representation and we have a say and things like that. I like to ask the questions of, we say that all the time. Is that really true? And then we show that it's not true. Well, on this episode and this topic, people say, number one, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have nothing to hide or nothing to worry about. And number two, we are under the rule of law. We are not under just the arbitrary whims of rulers or politicians. Well, is either one of those statements true? And I would argue that neither one is. You are not a law-abiding citizen. You are probably a criminal at this very moment. If they wanted to indict you for something, they could. And We are not under the rule of law because our law system has become so vague and incomprehensible that you are just now at the whim of the enforcers and the officials and
detection, which goes back.
And then when you live in a mass surveillance state, it's just that totalitarian system. Because I was like, okay, so everyone's a criminal. The law is incomprehensible. Ignorance to the law is no defense. You still have presumed knowledge of the law, even if the lawmakers and enforcers don't know it.
Right.
You're supposed to know it. Okay? There is no real right to due process because what happens is they call it like a kitchen sink indictment. There are so many laws that people can be indicted for that they just kind of throw all these charges at you. And you know that at least one of them is going to stick. So there's so much pressure to cop a plea that people have no real... They know that their life can easily be destroyed if they don't just plea bargain. So you see so many people pleading guilty to things that they didn't actually do. They had no evil intent. They did not know or don't even believe that they're breaking the law, but they don't ever get to trial.
That statistic that I had somewhere in the last 3 weeks, they said that 90%... when you get to trial, you lose. So
right,
people, they plea bargain to avoid trial.
You've only got a 10% chance of beating it.
Right.
And so they just say, well, this is, and save us the expense of a trial or whatever. So you just plead guilty. And they can even punish you if you never even do that. I mean, if none of that ever happens, they can seize your property. If they claim that some kind of racketeering charge or some kind of drug charge or something, they can just take your property.
Civil forfeiture.
Right. So that's a big problem.
Well, and I know there's probably some people listening go, well, there's 90% success rate on the prosecution side because these people are guilty of the crime that they've been charged with.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm sure in a number of cases they are. I mean, statistically, sure, there are criminals in the world. They're committing real crimes, and they should be prosecuted. But
it's easy to convict someone of a crime because you can always find a crime to convict them of.
That's a great point there, right? In other words, you don't really have to find criminals because we're all criminals. You just have to match the right crime to the person.
Yeah, and this is the state we find ourselves in. This is actually a quote from the KGB head under Stalin. We did a show on Stalin, too, a while ago. Laurenti Beria? Beria was the guy's name. Show me the man and I'll find you the crime.
What was the prosecutor that does the exercise with was it law students?
Yes, I think this is a common thing. There's another article here. Like I said, the 3 felonies a day, how the feds target the innocent. That's the book. One of the books that I'm reading, and there's a lot of stories there, and he does reference that here. But there's an article, which we will, of course, share on the Facebook page that kind of is the basis for this topic for me. It's called Oops, Did You Just Commit a Crime? By George F. Will. And I know that Tom's not really a fan of the author of this article, and I don't really know too much about him, but the article itself is, I think, good and covers the stuff we want to talk about. But they said... in 2007, Professor Tim Wu of Columbia Law School recounted a game played by some prosecutors. And I think it's a pretty common thing. I don't think it's only them.
Yes.
One would name a famous person, say Mother Teresa or John Lennon, and other prosecutors would try to imagine a plausible crime for which to indict him or her, usually a felony plucked from the incredibly broad yet obscure crimes that populate the U.S. Code like a kind of jurisprudential minefield. Did the person make false pretenses on the high seas? Is he guilty of injuring a mailbag? And those are pretty, pretty out there. But this 3 felonies a day book, they said the average business person, the average citizen engaging in the market, he came up with this average of 3 felonies a day that you could be indicted for because it's so vague. And I actually wrote down. I got a list. See, I got all my Post-it notes. I have no actual outline here. I just have little colored Post-it notes. So I'm a weirdo. Okay, federal crimes. Fraud. Fraud is very popular. It's one of the most common. But wire fraud, mail fraud, securities fraud, financial fraud, government fraud. If you lie to the government, they can lie to you, but you can't lie to them. So if you get caught, that's what they got Martha Stewart for.
Yes.
It was really marginal whether she actually engaged in insider trading. She just kind of knew that some big guy was selling and didn't know why and decided to sell, but she felt thought maybe she broke a law or kind of maybe she messed up. And so she then was not forthcoming with the prosecutor. So then they got her for
lying to them.
To the government. So these are the things, racketeering statutes. There's all kinds of things. I mean, for organized crime, this isn't just the mafia. This is like abortion protesters. I mean, what are other, there's all kinds of things that, they get people for like racketeering, antitrust violations, insider trading, tax evasion, kickbacks, money laundering, embezzlement, environmental violations. We always hear that story. Up here is like Al Capone, where we live, it's like Al Capone's hideout is up here and everything. So you hear about Al Capone. Didn't they ultimately get him for tax evasion?
Yes, I believe it was.
Like they'll find something and make it work. Well, then people say, oh, well, then they're just doing their job because they get him for something. Well, yeah, okay, maybe he was a bad guy, but at the same time,
get him for the crimes he actually committed.
Against all kinds of people who are not bad guys and not evil people. They're just basically being targeted.
Inadvertently breaking the rules of the guys who wrote them. But if you don't know them and you're right, and if they're so incomprehensible that you can't know them.
Right. And this happens at all levels. The book that I read was about federal prosecutors. And I didn't really know a whole lot about federal prosecutors. Don't know if I still do. But I mean, this is like this is part of like the executive branch, right? I don't know exactly how that works. I mean, isn't the like U.S. attorney... I don't know. It's like the president appoints who? Just one?
I don't know.
And these are like there's elected positions there. It's very political. And what happens is a lot of these prosecutors. I know that there are like multiple prosecutors in each state in their own jurisdiction, and then they go after people for federal crimes within their jurisdiction. And like most of the people, I mean, how many people in Congress were prosecutors at one time? They definitely have political aspirations, and they use the prosecutor's office to then prosecute these high-profile cases. So it's really to their advantage to find people to go after and really, big deal, high-profile cases, whether they're for real or not. And they've got nothing to lose by doing it.
There's, I think, the crux of the problem. And I've had this discussion this past weekend with a couple people, not exactly like this, but, I wound up saying, well, my position is I support markets for everything. And they go, of course, they usually go to money, courts. And I go, yes, let me talk about courts for a second, because I think this addresses this issue. Why do people support a monopoly in courts? And we all have those objections to monopolies, but leave that away. The point is, when there is a monopoly, there's no recourse. So the prosecutor charges you with 20 crimes, again, hoping one of them is going to stick. Why aren't they responsible? Why wouldn't they charge you with 20 crimes if they think you're guilty of one of them? Why not? There's no recourse against them for bringing the 19.
You don't get to say, hey, I'd like a second opinion from a different prosecutor.
Right.
Or a different court. I mean, they can go after you for whatever they want. So that's, I said, they throw everything but the kitchen sink after you, hoping that something will stick, and it works.
And being a monopoly, there's no cost aspect to them. Right? It's like, well, you brought 20 charges. 19 of them were unnecessary or outside what you really should have charged them with. So the defendant had to pay to defend himself against 20 charges instead of one. So it cost them, theoretically, just say it cost them 20 times as much as it should have. You go, oh, well. And you say, well, also it costs them 20 times as much to prosecute them. Well, they don't care.
It's not their money.
Right. It doesn't matter. So if it were a private court,
all they stand to lose is their
conviction rate,
win-lose record.
Yes, that's their conviction record.
So yeah, and they go after those high-profile cases that they think they can win. Like an example, like Rudy Giuliani, he was a prosecutor. Went after these high-profile cases. Well, obviously, he had a whole team of people that was like, working like for his like political image and things like that. While all that was going on, he was already
grooming
working
himself
on future political aspirations, and this happens over and over again. So, all of that to say, and I would add also, and I know I've referred so many times to past shows that we've done, but since we talked about representative government, we did kind of prove there that you really don't have any say over this, because you can't just vote and change it. we've seen that the statistics and the research is showing that that's ineffective. So you're stuck with this system. You can't stop these things from happening. So if you become a target, and you have a mass surveillance system where Big Brother's just watching you all the time. So if you're a member of an unpopular group, or you hold an unpopular opinion, or if you are a threat to government in any way, or even if just going after you just helps some prosecutor to, reach his future political aspirations, and you're not even a threat at all, they can go after you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
There's no recourse.
So to claim that this is the rule of law...
Perfect.
This is just the arbitrary, targeting of people, and there's no consistency. There's no ability to follow a clear law, clear guidelines to know if you're breaking the law.
Right.
And there's no way to know. There's the penalties. You talked about it, and it's in the article here about the penalties. I mean, people can get, for some random victimless crime, people can get a greater penalty than for murder or rape. It's just random.
Yes, because, and I would argue it's actually not completely random. In a totalitarian society, which I would argue we are, if you violate a rule of the state, that's to them is way more severe than you violating someone else's property
rights. Right.
Yeah, it's no big deal.
The greatest crime
is against the
to
state.
Offend the state or lie to the state. In so many of these cases, there's a lot of examples. There's 3 felonies a day. If you really like to read the stories and the details of all of these cases, the book is just full of interesting, colorful stories of what has happened to people. And, they talk about how, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but what was the last point that you just made?
I don't even know where I am.
It there. See, now we've gone on for no. No, it's just that that people get targeted, and that there's nothing
recourse.
You can do about it.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's no rule of law. There's no recourse, and so you just end up not being able to do anything about it. So that's my argument, that there's no rule of law. We have to stop saying that. I mean, I guess, I don't know what to do about it. I usually try to end the show by saying, what do we do about these things? But, I think stop lying to ourselves. This is one thing that I would advocate doing, is to stop telling ourselves that we're represented and I'm a law-abiding citizen and we are under the rule of law. These are just, at this point, just propaganda statements.
Yes.
They're not the truth, so let's tell the truth.
Yes, the words you use matter. The language you use matter. So let's use words and language that accurately describe the system or whatever you're trying to describe. And I totally agree. And that, I get that many times. We're a nation of laws, not of men. And it's, I usually throw the Fugitive Slave Act thing at them and the incarceration of the Japanese during World War II and And the argument I always get is, Tom, that's in the past. And I'm like, well, I'm trapped. I can't use an example of what's to happen in the future.
Well, so is the last statement I just made.
Yes.
So is the last show that we did. I mean, it's all in the past.
Right. But they're examples of how the system doesn't work, is my point. But people say, well, it's been corrected. Well, okay. If some errors, in fact, have been corrected, that's a good thing. I'm not going to argue that.
Right.
But that
I'm just arguing that you don't have, we don't have the rule of law. You do not really have the right to a trial, not the way that you think. The chances are that you are going to get pressured into copping a plea. If you are targeted in this way, the government has nothing to lose by doing it. So, this is a big problem, and it is... to me, I think so much of the time we think that there's this American exceptionalism.
Yes.
But if we look at other societies and we look at other governments, and we did a show on Stalin, or we talk about, Nazi Germany, or we talk about these other totalitarian regimes, we see the same patterns and the same things happening, but it's really hard for us to believe that we're going down that road, and that is happening to us, and that this could be the way things work for us. But this is the world that we live in, and this is the situation we find ourselves in. And, working through the system, voting, things like this are not effective. So we have to find other ways. I mean, on the past show, the book I referred to earlier, By the People, by Charles Murray, he talks about insuring yourself against government as a hazard.
Yes, I remember that.
Being indicted, that people could form organizations where they could kind of subscribe to this service that could defend them.
Yes.
In the case of an indictment, because this could happen to you. It's like lightning. Government could strike at any moment.
Yes. I think, you raised a whole lot of good points there and made great observations. And I think that's for people to really think about, that there is no such thing as a law-abiding citizen. The laws are incomprehensible, inconsistent, changing over time. I would argue way needlessly complex. I think on purpose, but that's obviously debatable, right? So you cannot follow the law. So it's a question of detection, and you could be targeted. You could be the result of lightning striking. It could happen.
So what would you say to people who would just say, well, why don't we just change the laws? Why don't we just lobby to simplify the laws and take away all this mess? And
because it's really, in my basic view, is messing with that dial on the stove. You're saying turn the heat down. Well, the problem is the dial's there that someone else could just turn it right back up. It seems like at best a temporary fix.
Did you talk on the past show about how many laws there are on the books and how?
I think it was mentioned, but
I think,
yeah,
they said it's there. There's an article that we looked at, the many failed efforts to count.
Yes, there's been a number of studies.
Federal criminal laws, and that's just the federal laws. And then, of course, you have state, local laws. You have all of the regulations, and there's mass numbers of things, and all the rulings of the courts and precedent, all that kind of stuff that carries the weight of law. It is just a massive number of laws. The ones they can count, which they can't even count, I think estimates now are somewhere like 4,500 federal laws.
I think,
and that
at least
doesn't even count the volumes and volumes and volumes of other laws.
And all other crap.
Yeah, so that is, kind of what we're looking at here. So it is impossible, and they have not changed it. And I suppose maybe that would be a positive move in some way if they change something to do with your requirement that you are assumed to have knowledge of the law,
right?
But then also, is it mens rea, where you have to in the past the English common law tradition, and it was always our tradition that there was some kind of criminal intent.
Yes,
that you actually knew you were committing a crime, intended to commit a crime, intended to disobey the law, and they've pretty much just taken that away. I mean, the precedent, it just, time after time, they're just saying, well, if the law existed and you broke it, doesn't matter if you didn't know it existed, it doesn't matter if you didn't intend to break the law,
you did.
You're still guilty.
Yeah. I just want to read one paragraph of America Fails the Rule of Law Test. I don't even know where this is from. The Atlantic, it was. I think you forwarded this to me.
Yeah, this was the article that we didn't like the conclusion of this article, but we liked the point that's made in the beginning.
I'm just going to read the first paragraph quick because we're going to have to end the show here. But the U.S. Army Field Manual defines the rule of law as follows. The rule of law refers to a principle of governance in which all persons, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to the laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated, and which are consistent with international human rights norms and standards. It requires as well measures to ensure adherence to the principles of supremacy of law, equity before the law, accountability to the law, fairness in the application of the law, separation of powers, participation in decision-making, legal certainty, avoidance of arbitrariness, and procedural and legal transparency. Going by that definition, the U.S. government does not operate according to the rule of law. That's from this article.
Yes, so, that was that making the point that, yes, we are not, there is no clear system that can be predicted what the outcome is going to be. It has nothing to do with your intent. It just...
As a practical matter, you cannot follow the laws, and therefore you're a criminal.
Right. I like this quote. This was another one. This was from the 3 Felonies a Day book. When the law becomes a trap for the unwary, it becomes an engine of oppression rather than a statement of the moral and ethical requirements of a society's citizens.
I like that one. That's good.
So the law has become an engine of oppression.
No doubt.
So that is not the rule of law.
We're going to leave it there. We got to go, everybody. We did the longest show in the history of the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. So with that, Brad, do you want to close us out?
I would be glad to.
All right. Yeah, you probably would be. You want to end this, don't you?
Not at all. No, you guys are just been sitting back, listening, and enjoying your discussion. I think that there'd be a lot of people that would. I think they would be pretty challenged to think that it's as oppressive as you guys describe. But I also think that if you sit back and begin to question it, that it's pretty easy to connect the dots.
Yeah.
You want me to start with this quote, Tom?
Sure.
It's an Ayn Rand quote, and the quote is, "The right to agree with others is not a problem in any society. It's the right to disagree that is crucial." Thanks, everybody, for joining us. As we always say, if you enjoyed this, please tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell your enemies and see if they'll listen to us. Next episode is yet to be determined. I'm going to propose something.
Okay, cool.
And that would be that we talk about Rand Paul.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
And not just about his candidacy, but why you are opposed to any candidate whatsoever.
Oh, geez, put me on the spot. Okay, that sounds cool.
I can get on board with this, and we can talk about it. I think it's very interesting.
Okay.
We can discuss later. To be determined next week, next Tuesday, July 7th at 7 p.m. Thanks to Tanya, the Northwoods mom. Way to go, Tanya. Always enjoy having you.
Awesome job.
Well, thanks for having me, as usual.
Love to see you guys sometime soon. That'd be really fun. And we hope we provoked you to think with something we said tonight. Please make your comments on Facebook. Thanks for listening. We look forward to our next discussion. Until next time, this has been the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks, Brad, for joining us. Thanks, everybody. And we're leaving you tonight with Goodbye Weekend from Mac DeMarco. My last comment is, ask more questions. Good night.